This creek reminds me of the creek that ran through our neighborhood when I was a kid. My brother and my friends and I went there a lot to play. My parents said we shouldn't go. I'm sure they thought we would drown or get bitten by a snake. But we went anyway, and we played there in the water and got muddy and messed up a lot of shoes and pants and socks and made my mother really mad. That creek still runs through that neighborhood, but no kids play in it anymore because the neighborhood has changed and the families are afraid that the water will be too dirty and they will get sick with E. coli or some other illness. I think Salem Creek might be a little bit like that too. That's where we are today. Above us runs a bridge that carries people in their cars to and from work and to and from school and to and from other places in the city. And there's a pathway back here that's been created to preserve some of the beauty of this place so that people can bike or run or jog or walk. And then there is the creek. And I come here sometimes and I think it's easy for me to imagine how God is in beautiful creation places up in the mountains where the waters are pristine and pure, at the ocean where the waters rush in and lull us to sleep at night. But here by this creek with a bridge running over it, where pollution fogs the air, where just down the way people are hungry or homeless, where violence happens. Here I wonder, how is God in these waters, this creek? How is this creek sacramental, drenched with God's presence, as Linda Gibler says in the beginnings to baptism? I wonder. And that's the question for our conversation today and this week. How are cities sacramental? Can Winston-Salem be a sacrament of God, a place, not just the beautiful places that have been preserved like Washington Park or the Gateway Nature Center, but this place, and places downtown where there are high-rises and the streets are dirty, the sideways where people won't go at night for fear of their lives. How are those places also sacramental, full of God's presence, places where we can connect to God's love and grace and justice? The idea of sacramentality, that the earth is drenched with God's presence, is not unheard of, both in ordinance and sacrament traditions. Sacramentality is a concept that refers to how we experience God in our everyday world. To cultivate a sacramental worldview is to seek how and where God is with us in this world, and how and where God decided and decides to dwell in the life and story of Jesus. Sacramentality has to do with the things of this earth: soil, air, fire, water, and how they connect us with God. But they are used in worship along with words and texts and actions. We need both: prayers, scripture readings, theological table talk about redemption and healing and covenant. And we need in worship the stuff of this world, things produced by human hands and actions embodied in human bodies. Seeing, listening, kissing, washing, processing, singing, even dancing. And we need spirit, opening all of our senses to the aromas of God's grace as it moves through our midst in soul-stirring, but often unseen ways. In most traditions, baptism and the Lord's Supper are focused moments within regular worship when we emphasize with particular symbolic or sacramental acts Christian identity and God's work of grace in our lives. The word symbolic helps us to understand how these worship acts function. Some ordinance leaders connect baptism and communion to Jesus' parables. Jesus used parables with earthy and earthly stuff in them to speak about holy things, to point to God's presence. Baptism and the Lord's Supper, in a similar way, are symbolic. They point to God's work in our world. Or as John Calvin put it in his sacramental tradition, sacraments are visible signs and seals of God's grace. A sacrament is a particular thing to which God attaches a word of promise. So, how are cities sacramental? Martha and Mo Hartley, researchers and archaeologists for Old Salem, speak about the historic waters that run unseen underneath our city's bridges and roads. Bridges like this one. These waters carry life. Our cities are alive with unseen, hidden life. How is the entire cosmos, our cities included, drenched with God's presence? Jesus invites us to think about that through the parables. I invite you to think about it too. The sermon that follows was preached at Highland Presbyterian Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, on August 30th, 2015. The text is Matthew 13, 31 to 35. Two parables are in this text. In this sermon and the hymn that follow, you might hear and see one way to imagine inviting worshipers on a regular Sunday into a renewed sacramental imagination.